You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com. And now here I am, holding a law degree I never used a single day in court. Why? Because once I figured out the math, it just didn't make sense for me. I grew up in a house where being a doctor or a lawyer was the only way to win. You picked doctor or you were nothing. That was the culture. My parents came over from the region of Punjab in India. They brought almost nothing but grit and big dreams. I saw them grind every single day. If my dad got 2 days off in a row, Saturday and Sunday, it was like a vacation. They didn't have time to sit around. They didn't have time to drop wisdom about passive income or assets or entrepreneurship. All they could tell me was, you have to be successful, do it the right way, be stable. And I agreed with them. I wanted to make enough money to take care of them. I wanted to pay them back for what they'd sacrificed. So I followed the script. I did the study, got the grades, looked into medical school. That was the path. But then something weird happened. I was deep in pre-med, nose buried in textbooks, and I started picking up these business books, just curiosity at first. I remember sitting in the library one night, completely done with memorizing cell structures, and I typed into the search bar, "Who are the richest people in America?" And it spit out names like Steve Jobs, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and none of them were doctors. None of them had punched in for a paycheck as a salaried worker climbing the same old ladder. And that threw me off because my entire belief system said, good grades equals good job equals more money equals success. That was it. So why did the richest people on the planet not follow the same path I was killing myself for? Once you crack that door open, you can't unsee it. The deeper I looked, the more I realized the entire story I'd been told about wealth was upside down. So that was the beginning, the phase where I was more confused than confident. But I knew I needed to learn how money really moves. And the only way to learn it was to try stuff. My first real hands-on lesson, a tiny event planning hustle I started in college. But really, that hustle goes back further. In high school, I used to work at Indian weddings. Those huge parties. I knew all the DJs, and these DJs saw I knew half the kids in my school, so they pitched me, "Hey, you know everyone, why not help us throw parties for teens?" So that's what I did. I helped throw these parties. A little side cash, nothing serious. Then I got to college. And college was nothing like what my parents imagined. They thought college was pure hard work, pure studying. And yeah, some of that happened. But mostly, people were partying and spending money they didn't have. I didn't drink, didn't smoke, wasn't really into that scene. But Friday nights were wide open, so I figured, why not take my high school hustle to campus? I started walking into every bar, every club, every restaurant I could find near campus, asking if they'd let me throw a party there. Some wanted $10,000 up front. Some wanted 20 grand, which I didn't have. But a couple said, all right, no upfront fee. You bring people in, you take half the money at the door, we keep half. Deal. So now I'm 17, I'm making a little money throwing college parties, and I start stacking up some cash. That's when the books really kicked in. Every book I read said the same thing. People with wealth invest in real estate. I didn't know a single person who owned investment property. Nobody in my family even talked about it. But I figured if it worked for the people on that richest people list, maybe I should figure it out too. And this was right after the big crash in 2008. I was in Michigan. Real estate was dirt cheap. So between studying for my medical entrance exam, I'm Googling foreclosures, literally taking practice tests for the medical exam, then flipping over to listings for cheap condos. August 22nd, I sit for the medical exam. August 23rd, I close on my first real estate property. I was 19 years old, paid $8,000 for a condo that used to be worth $150,000 before the crash. I had no clue what I was doing. Offered $4,000 first. They came down to $7,000. We settled at $8,000. Put a couple thousand into fixing it, turned around and rented it for $600 a month. And that right there flipped my whole world. Now I wasn't just earning money from throwing parties. I was making money while I was asleep. Sure, I made mistakes, but the idea of income showing up without me clocking in, I was hooked. The problem was, once you see that, you can't pretend to unsee it. Now I'm looking at medical school sideways. I'm thinking, why am I trying to treat more patients to make more money when I could be building something that works while I sleep? But that put me right up against the brick wall of my parents' dream for me. I told them I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. My dad was furious. My mom cried. Took her more than a year to believe me when I said I was serious. Calls from relatives across the ocean telling me I was throwing my life away. I heard it all, but I stuck to it. Because here's what I started to get. The entire game is different than what we were told. Most people are trained to get that degree so they can work for somebody else and climb this invisible ladder. But people with real wealth, they're not climbing the ladder. They own the ladder. And when you own the ladder, you don't have to worry if one job vanishes or if your boss replaces you. But they don't teach you that part. They teach you just enough to show up, keep your head down, and spend every dollar you earn. Because the truth is, it's profitable for the system to keep people broke. Banks make money when you're broke. Governments benefit when you're broke. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just basic math. Look at banks, for example. When you deposit money, they don't want to hold on to it. For them, your cash is a liability. So they take your money, turn around, lend it to somebody else at 5–6% interest while paying you basically nothing to keep it there. And while you're losing money to inflation every single day your cash sits there, they're getting richer off the same dollars. They love it when you swipe that credit card too. Every swipe racks up interest for them. 18, 20%, 25%. That's your debt feeding their profit. And taxes? Same deal. When you're an employee, your taxes get taken first. They know exactly how to get your cut before your check even lands in your bank. Meanwhile, the same tax code is stuffed full of pages that explain exactly how to legally pay less if you own things, if you invest, if you build businesses. But nobody breaks that down in school. So, the moment you catch on to how the system runs, you can't help but look at your paycheck or your savings account and think, wait a second, I've been doing it backward this whole time. And the only people getting rich off my backwards way are the ones I'm paying interest to and taxes to. So then the question is, all right, how do you turn this around? First thing is understanding the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. Nobody ever broke that down for me in school. Evasion? That's straight illegal. That's how you end up with handcuffs, court dates, bad news all around. But tax avoidance? Entirely legal, if you play by the rules. It's about knowing how the rule book works. The tax code is a massive puzzle, and the people with money learn how to hire accountants and lawyers to solve that puzzle. The thing is, you do not need millions to learn this stuff. You just need curiosity and the willingness to learn. Take some of the big names, the ultra-wealthy ones who pay next to nothing in income taxes. The reason is they know how to turn income into something else. One trick. Instead of paying yourself a fat salary that the government eats up in taxes, you take stock options. Stock options are basically the right to buy a piece of a company at a locked-in price. If that company's value explodes, you're holding on to a mountain of value. But it's not income yet. No income means no income tax. So how do they live? They go to the bank with that mountain of paper wealth and say, lend me money against my stock. The bank says, absolutely. They get cash at a tiny interest rate, spend that to live however they want. And the tax bill for that loan is zero because debt isn't income. That right there is one piece of the game. But you don't have to run $1 billion company to borrow that playbook. Think about your own expenses. Some people hear about this and think, well, I'm not going to run out and grab a big loan to live on. And that's smart, unless you have assets paying you back more than what you borrow costs. Example, if you buy a rental property that pays you more every month than the mortgage costs, that debt makes you richer. If you run a legit business, you can write off a ton of things as business expenses. Meals with your team, business travel, the car you use for meetings. But you do need to be smart about it. No sense in buying a luxury car just to get a tax deduction if the car doesn't make you money. My accountant once told me, hey, you should go buy a big fancy car. It's a huge write-off this year. I looked at the numbers and said no thanks. I'd rather keep my cash working for me. And that's the biggest flip. Stop spending just to spend. Spend strategically. Every dollar should have a job, either to make you more dollars or to protect the dollars you already have. If it does neither, it's just draining you. Real estate is a classic example. After I dipped my toe in with that $8,000 condo, I kept going. The timing helped. Properties were cheap, neighborhoods were full of abandoned homes, and people still needed places to live. So I bought more. But I didn't buy hoping the price would go up next year so I could sell it off quick. That's gambling. I bought for cash flow. The money that comes in every single month when you rent a place out and your expenses are covered. As long as that cash flow keeps rolling, the ups and downs of the market don't scare you. That's the difference between investors who survive downturns and people who lose everything when the bubble pops. And yet, even with all that, my main focus right now isn't real estate, it's my businesses. Because once you build momentum, you see where the bigger engine is. For me, my real estate brings in steady cash flow, but my business brings in growth. If I invest $1 into my company, maybe I make back 7, maybe 10, maybe more. That's not guaranteed, but it's a calculated bet I believe in because I control it more than I control the housing market. Now let's swing back to debt for a second. Here's something I wish someone would have told me at 16. Not all debt is bad. Debt is like fire. It can cook your food or burn your house down. Depends who's holding the match. Bad debt is debt that doesn't pay you back. Charging up luxury handbags and fancy dinners on a credit card? Bad debt. Financing a new car you don't really need just to flex on social media? Bad debt. But debt you use to buy assets that produce income? That's an investment tool. That's why banks love lending to people with real assets. They know you're not just spending, you're building something that covers the cost. But if you're swimming in bad debt already, your priority is getting your head above water first. Some people get stuck paying minimum payments forever. If that's you, first thing is to stop making it worse. Cut the spending. Then, if you can, talk to your lenders. Sometimes they'll negotiate. Maybe they'll take less than the total if you pay it off faster. Or move some of that balance to zero interest cards if you trust yourself not to run it back up. But the key is discipline. No new debt for stuff that doesn't work for you. And while you're digging out, don't forget the other side. Earn more. Cut expenses all you want. But you can't shrink your way to wealth. There's only so much to cut. There's no ceiling on how much you can earn if you learn how to build value. That means learning skills, starting side hustles, investing the cash those hustles throw off. It does not mean working 3 jobs forever and burning yourself out. The point is to get your money working harder than you do. And the final piece here, and this one stings a little when you first hear it, is you have to be willing to mess up. Nothing about money is perfect. You will lose money sometimes. You will make dumb calls. You will trust the wrong person. You will get scammed. Ask me how I know. But those losses are tuition. I learned more from a property deal gone wrong than I ever learned from textbooks. I paid for that lesson in real money. But the next deal I did better, and better after that. The only way to lose for good is to quit after the first punch. So, we talked about how important it is to stay in the game long enough to learn its rhythm. The reality is this: mistakes teach you faster than any classroom ever could. Take my worst real estate deal, for example. That one deal taught me more than the first 10 that went smooth. I learned about shady contractors who take your deposit and vanish. I learned about tenants who turn your rental into a zoo with animals you never agreed to host. I learned about city inspectors who cannot agree on what they want, but still charge you for every little correction, every extra foot of pipe, every repaint and replacement. All those headaches, all that money gone. I could have let that shut me down, but instead, I kept asking myself one question. If other investors have thousands of doors, there's got to be a better way. So I stuck it out, and I built the systems to protect myself next time. And that's what I want people to hear. You cannot win this game hiding on the sidelines. The people who do well aren't usually the smartest in the room. They're just the ones who stayed long enough to figure out what works for them and cut what doesn't. And once you start seeing your money work for you, you see how deep the rabbit hole goes. You start seeing the traps for what they are, the expensive cars, the big shiny toys you think prove you made it. When I first made good money, I wasted a ton trying to look like I had money. I dropped cash on fancy car rims, new paint jobs, lights, stupid stuff that looked good parked outside but ate up every dollar inside my account. I had $1,000. I spent it on a watch. And it took me blowing cash like that to learn you can't buy respect, you earn it by building. When I finally understood that, my spending flipped overnight. I drove the same beat-up car for years, even when my income jumped into six figures. My employees drove better cars than I did. I slept on a mattress on the floor of a living room to save rent, just so I could put every spare dollar into property or my business or anything that would grow while I slept. Because once you see how powerful compound growth is, you can't stand to watch money leak away on stuff that looks good for strangers but does nothing for you. And there's another side to this: abundance. Having an abundant mindset doesn't mean blowing money left and right. It means believing you can grow your pie so big that you don't have to squeeze pennies forever. Most people are taught to squeeze. Save an extra 5%, pinch every corner, cut this, skip that. Sure, be smart. But real wealth comes from expanding what you earn, not just shrinking what you spend. It comes from asking bigger questions. How do I get from 40 grand to 400? How do I use what I know to create value people will pay for? And then, when you have that extra, you protect it, you grow it, and you remember who it's really for. Because money by itself is just paper and numbers in an account. The real value is what you do with it, how it frees your time, how it supports your family, how it lets you help people who are still stuck where you started. I've always said this: giving is a huge part of this cycle. I love building businesses. I love making deals, but I also love turning around and using that success to help the same people who never got taught any of this. That's why I go back to schools, hand teachers' checks, buy out supply stores, try to pour money back into the same neighborhoods where I first learned what struggle looks like. Because that's where the cycle flips. And in the end, that's what keeps me fired up. Not the commas in my bank account, not the cars I could buy now but don't, not the titles or the trophies. The real win is freedom, options, knowing that if I want to take a day off, I can. If my family needs something, I can handle it. If someone around me needs a break, I can be that break. And that doesn't happen overnight. But it starts the moment you decide to stop playing by rules that were never designed to make you rich. So think bigger. Learn how the game is played, not just how to show up to work for it. Make mistakes, get up, make more, and do it all knowing this one thing: the system was built by people, and it can be bent by people who know how to read it.